I've been focused on the issue of safe technology for 12 years, and I've been an educator, health educator, author, activist, and started my work in environmental health focused on electromagnetic fields. Then it broadened out to cover tech overuse and addiction as we started to see the horrendous effects technology was having on children in the early years. And children were starting to be diagnosed with digital dementia. So the research was pouring in about the risk to fetuses and children, but it took a long time for the mainstream media to start covering it, and they still don't cover it enough. But now, in the COVID era, people are suffering all over the world, partly due to the algorithms designed to addict us, but also due to the electromagnetic fields, the screen effects from the lighting and flicker, the overstimulation, the multitasking effects, and people confusing video games with life, and video game psychosis. So it's a perfect time now to share what we know and to help each other cope with the negative effects of technology, cultivating balance, peace, and productivity through other activities that can counter the stresses on our bodies from the many unnatural forces in these technologies. The structure for today's talk is going to be divided into 10 sections. First, we're going to take a big step back and think strategically about our relationship with technology and what the values are that we want to guide that relationship with technology. Then we're going to create a framework for the different ways that screen time is impacting people physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Then we're going to get into tips to counter attention fragmentation, time management tips, tech management tips, talk about the importance of slowing down, ways that we can proactively work with stress from the technologies, ways that we can proactively promote health and wholeness, and then tips specific to children and technology. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a big picture lens of looking at all of this and seeing the self-sabotage of our obsession with and addiction to technology. So we need to strategically think about technology in our lives by first deciding on what our values are and then aligning our life so that the technology is supporting those values. We want to weigh the dominance of technology in your life on a daily but also on an annual basis and can take a look at the time spent online versus the actual benefits you're getting or may not be getting. It's important to calculate the months of your precious life that you're spending online. For example, and we'll talk a little more about this later, but for example, 5 hours a day online is over 4 months of your waking life per year. It's 122 days if you assume that there are 15 hours of waking life every day. 11 hours online is almost 9 months of your waking life. So we really need to focus on these numbers and decide if this is really how we want to be wasting our life. You want to instead decide on the things that are important to you and then choose to give the high quality attention there. Not sweating the non-priorities, don't worry about those, but it's okay to just focus on what truly matters to you. And you find out about what's important to you by going inward within yourself instead of to the internet and social media that are dopaminergic stimulants. There's an unending number of subjects of interest to you. In fact, there's enough information for many lifetimes, and we cannot do it all. We cannot learn it all. We have to acknowledge that. And if we allow in too much information, no matter how interesting or valuable the content is, we will be an information overload, and that is where we are today, and addicted to stimulants.
As a psychiatrist or as a stress researcher, I'm especially concerned about the way in which the energy of seeking, the sort of fast pace, looking for something, wanting something, getting distracted from the present, distracted from our bodies, distracted from our emotions and relationships, that the acceleration of the natural tendency we have to, seek for something, crave something, distract ourselves with a wish or fantasy is getting very, very much, sort of ramped up by the explosion of internet technology and the way in which that explosion is now really impacting every aspect of our lives at earlier and earlier ages, and really sort of, as I see it as a therapist or as a physician, it's like cranking up the speed meter on the way our nervous systems are operating, so that everything is running in overdrive, and everything is running faster than it really can run efficiently, running faster than it can sustain over time, and I think really running in a way that's predisposing all of us to have a whole range of stress-related illnesses. Computers really are the ultimate, tools or toys that make us, kind of want to live in this virtual reality, in this ever-receding horizon of what's the next interesting thing or the next connection or the next whatever. And essentially our kids have been raised in this kind of extremely unrooted culture and imbalanced culture. And so they themselves are showing the signs that we as a civilization have been showing. They're emotionally underdeveloped. They are overly invested in fantasy or game or information. They're kind of glib, and I think it's really important that we see in our kids the consequences of the world that we've created and the values that we're trying to enact.
So it's very important that we choose how we're going to engage with technology. We need to ground in a tech life philosophy to guide your choices of how you're going to interact with technology. So I ask, what are you committed to today? Using no phones in social situations, no screen Sundays, tech-free meals, tech-free family vacations, digital minimalism, no tech time blocks during the day. We need to make these choices. So first we're going to go over a brief overview of the way that screen time is affecting us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this graphic was created by Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who's the author of the book Reset Your Child's Brain. And she presented one of our programs in California at the Commonwealth Club. And here she lays out the different factors that are all contributing to a hyperarousal state. And it's not just the algorithms that are designed to addict, but there are kind of 6 main categories. The reward addiction pathways of tech use, the intense sensory stimulation, the bright and blue tone light, the media multitasking, the interactivity and rapid pace, and the electromagnetic radiation. All of these are contributing to a hyperarousal state. Dr. Dunkley says that the trends on the rise in children include psychiatric disorders, psychotropic medication use, chronic medical conditions, disability filings, and that the known risks from screen time include obesity, metabolic syndrome problems, other medical problems, mental health issues and sleep disturbances, delinquency, social incompetency, aggression, addictions, delayed language and reading, and impaired attention, diminished creativity, and sensory integration issues. And of note, interactive screen time which we're engaged with today, is far more dysregulating than passive screen time, like in the olden days with televisions. It's also really important to understand that the EMF effects, electromagnetic field effects from screen time, and these are some of the categories of harm described in the Bioinitiative report, which is a big review of the science on the subject a few years back. And what it's telling us is that it's very important to hardwire internet connections at home and wherever you can. Some of the known biological and health effects from wireless radiation described in the Bioinitiative report include neurological effects, stress response, oxidative damage, effects on immune function, cancers, DNA effects, brain cancer, blood-brain barrier damage, breast cancer, promotion, biochemical imbalances, fertility and reproductive effects, and fetal and neonatal effects. And I think that's one that's worth talking a little bit about. There was a great study at UCLA and with some Danish researchers and thousands of pregnant mothers who were using cell phones, and they measured the effects. They measured their state of their emotional health at age 7 when those babies were born. When they grew up to be age 7, 54% of them had social and emotional problems if their mother had been exposing them in utero to the cell phone. And if by that same age they were already using a cell phone themselves, then the social and emotional problems went up to 83%. Very worthwhile understanding the importance of not using a cell phone near a fetus. Now, I know that there's some people who think that, well, they're not affected by electromagnetic fields because they don't necessarily feel any symptoms. And many people feel that way, but I want you to understand that you it's important to understand that you are being impacted. Here's a thermography graph done by a physician I know of one of his assistants. And after 10 minutes, if you can see in the thermography the brain getting, it's more red after 5 minutes, and after 10 minutes even more red. And in fact, there was an average temperature increase in the mid-face area that they were monitoring of 3.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So no question these cell phones are affecting our brain and are heating our brain. Here is a QEEG study after 2 minutes on a cell phone call in a healthy student. You can see initially the baseline mostly green, and after 2 minutes on a cell phone, the brain lit up in a QEEG test. This slide shows the impacts on red blood cells. This was a study done by Dr. Beverly Rubik, and it shows short-term cell phone exposure has dramatic red blood cell aggregation as well as morphological shape changes, in other words, in the red blood cells. On the left, you see the sort of balanced, freely floating red blood cells, the baseline condition of a 55-year-old man. The middle image is a carrying condition where they put the cell phone in a backpack. So the blood cells are starting to clump together. And then when they're actively using the cell phone, look at what happens. So much congestion, clumping together, and the shape of the cells has also changed. You see it looks sort of like a bottle cap around the edges of the cells. Now, in terms of the spiritual effects, this is a big subject. It's hard to simplify it. But I'm just going to say that screen time encourages a disconnection from the larger whole. And when you're addicted or you're obsessed with something, you can't be connected to all that is around you at the same time. You're compulsively addicted. And also, our use of technology today, we're worshiping it on some level and thinking it's just the best. In violation of the Ten Commandments and for idolatry. And this situation is worsening with the trend toward transhumanism, where they want to interconnect us to computers and have our brains hooked up to computers to make us more, I guess, intelligent in their definition of it. And it's a very bad trajectory. And then finally, in terms of understanding our connection with that bigger whole, it's recently been learned by some frontier scientists that there's a communication that's happening between water molecules in our bodies and between our bodies and the earth, the soil, the trees, and the quantum fields. And those connections can only be made when the water molecules are in a state of coherence and a balance, not when they're chaotic. And these electromagnetic fields in particular are impairing that communication, making the communication chaotic and limiting our ability to connect with the quantum fields. This essentially is dumbing us down, and it's coherent water is important for the preservation of our intelligence and consciousness. So we're making a very big mistake as a world, society, in putting all this radiation into our environment that's disrupting the water communications.
I started seeing young people that were shifting, that they were really getting impacted in a pretty profound clinical way, increased depression rates, anxiety rates, addictive disorders. We saw a society on fire, and what was troubling to me was that we're on fire and we don't even realize it. I think of the parable of the frog in the water. The water's getting hotter, the water's boiling, we're going to die soon, but we don't realize it. And in fact, we're addicted to the water. And in fact, we're playing Candy Crush while the water's boiling. And in fact, we're distracted while we're dying. And that's sort of what's happened. We're really in this really toxic environment right now, both clinically, neurologically, physiologically, and we're really underaware of it because the shiny bauble has kept us somewhat smitten by it. We've been in love with our gadgets, and I give you Exhibit A. And Exhibit A is a phenomenal device. I don't think any of us can really underestimate as a technological advancement how amazing this device is. You know, in the palm of our hands, we have a portal to all the wisdom in the world, essentially. More wisdom than the Library of Alexandria we can access in the palm of our hands. So as a piece of technology, it's a phenomenal advancement. But like Thoreau had said 150 years ago, we've become the tool of our tools. There's wonderful tools, but now the tools own us. And you know, fire is wonderful when we invented fire, but is the fire now consuming us? And that's what we really have to start looking at, because rather than looking down and saying, gee, isn't this neat, and really being distracted and understanding how our distraction and our habituation to our devices is not by accident. It's not a happy accident that most of us have some level of screen habituation. By a show of hands, out of curiosity, how many of you get a little bit antsy when your phone battery runs low? How many of you get a little bit squirrely when you can't have your phone on, even for this lecture today? How many of you felt a little bit squirrely that, all right, some of you may not feel free to admit it, that's okay, we won't judge. And most of us in this room are of a certain age with a certain level of neurological development, and it's impacted us. It's impacted how we are as a species, how we socialize, how compulsive and impulsive we are. And we have a very fully developed prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning, which controls our impulsivity. We're not, I mean, I don't see anybody in here, we're not 16 or 17, where their frontal cortex is still much more impacted by by different impacts. So this squirreliness that we have, this irrational fear that our battery is running out, it's called nomophobia. It's an actual disorder that they've begun to treat, and you can see it up there. It's this feeling that we get, and it can be somewhat humorous, but now how did this all happen? How did screen time, how did technology begin to consume us? And we have to understand that there were certain primal drives that technology really taps into. And so we talk, number one, we talk about the need for social connection. We are hardwired social animals. The tribe survives. And so it's in our genetic hardwiring to have social connection. And so it seems that things like social media, which should have been like chocolate and peanut butter, social media to a social species should have been a wonderful thing. But we've seen that social media really hijacks the social need and really gives it something, doesn't really give us genuine social connection in the way that we need it. They've done studies that show that for us to have a meaningful social interaction, we have to maintain eye contact at least 70% of the time. And that if we're interacting digitally, that's not really feeding the soul and the psychological, emotional needs that we have as a social species.
Okay, so how do we minimize attention fragmentation? A couple of recommendations here. You can minimize the number of ways that people can access you. Email, texting, Facebook, WhatsApp. Be clear that you have firm boundaries. Limit those. Keep paring down the list and take back your time. Some people use virtual assistants to separate themselves from social media and from people emailing them. And I assure you that messages going to a third party will deter a lot of people from contacting you. You also want to emphasize monotasking, in other words, focusing on one thing at a time, and deep concentration and not multitasking. The research shows that task switching can decrease productivity by 40%. You want to keep the phone off or in airplane mode when it's not being used. You don't want to have it on, tethered to you, where you're responding to the next stimuli, like a Pavlovian dog. So your intention to be fully present in social and business situations is important. It's especially appreciated today, and we can't just, assume that we're going to be present. Today, with all the distractions from technology, we really need to get connected to our intention to be fully present for others. In addition, you can change your lifestyle so that it's conducive to the ability to be present for another. And you need to really think, if it's individual, what would it require in your case to pay full attention? What do you need to do? And you can also work on lengthening your natural attention span and your ability to focus. The more you do it, you strengthen these brain capacities like a muscle, and that have gotten very weak. And you want to include a variety of experiences in your day. Now, not many people understand this, but I have here in the next slide, we're going to see Michael Gilbert, who talks about the importance of variety in your day as a way of working with your senses and expanding your senses. And the variety is a key to agility in your nervous system. If you don't have agility and you have rigidity, an example of that might be where you just can't even pull yourself away from the computer. You just are frozen in a way. And if you've experienced that, listen carefully to what Michael Gilbert has to say about variety.
There's tons of studies to show that enrichment is really important to any animal's capacity to function well. You put any animal into an environment where there's a lack of enrichment, you put them in a cage, you can see their health goes downhill deeply. Their ability to function and interact and their tendency to be aggressive goes way up. So we need to understand that our nervous systems are no different than any other animal. Nervous systems are designed to manage, to regulate energy. And what we need to do is understand that the variety and social interaction is what makes that work. There is no technology on the earth that'll ever be created that can substitute social interaction. Social interaction is the backbone of getting a nervous system to manage energy best. Nervous systems are designed to be modulated. Therefore, we think, we experience life, we enjoy experience. If we're not understanding that they're designed to be modulated, this is where we run into a problem. And modulation is how we keep a nervous system rhythmic so energy flows best. Nervous systems aren't designed to be regimented and firing in only one manner. So when kids sit in front of an iPad or something like that and they're experiencing these RF waves, that's a huge load factor on a nervous system, and it loses its ability to stay rhythmic, adapt. Or we could say it's being modulated so fast that the child's behaviors can't keep up, and they get stuck. Nervous systems get stuck. We end up with all sorts of chronic problems, and that goes for addictions and chronic pain and all sorts of things. So the key here is that interaction, especially from a parent, is how we help kids keep their nervous systems modulated. One thing that is a bit overwhelming for me is how our society is becoming so much more electronic minded. It's everywhere, and it even makes it hard to have a social connection with people. That our society is moving in this direction as if that's a better society is very confusing to me. Electronics and these tools that we use are just that, tools, but when they actually become how we interrelate with each other, that's a huge problem. We're seeing those problems evident today. People are having much less self-control. They're making choices that act as if other people don't matter, And we've made technology so important that we'll pay $10,000 for the carpenter's hammer, and for the carpenter we pay him $2. It's the wrong approach. We need to put social interaction and bring it up, which means endorsing all sorts of arts. I mean, there's a lot of people, especially in our society, that look at arts as if something we shouldn't pay for. And yet we'll pay, $1 trillion for an F-13. It's not the right approach. We need to understand that social interaction is paramount for healthy nervous systems. And then we can have healthy minds, but you can't have a healthy mind if a nervous system is not able to modulate, to move between one and the other, yin and yang. They're designed to move between yin and yang. That's how energy flows best. When they don't, we're suffering. Learning is dependent on a nervous system that is able to adjust. It'd be like having a Lamborghini or some expensive car with only one gear. I mean, it's a great car. It can do anything. But if you can't shift out of first gear, you have a nervous system that's watching an iPad. Nervous systems that watch iPad or deal in electronics over time are like a wonderful, brilliant car that can't shift gears.
So here are some other tips for countering the attention fragmentation. You want to limit online news feeds that have stimulating breaking news notifications, and choose in advance good sources of information that you'd like to regularly read or view. You want to be selective. So you have to acknowledge that you can't read everything as much as you might like to. So you have to choose what you read wisely, or information that you receive in other ways wisely. You have to select. So if I were you, I would give yourself a time window or two every year where you review and modify your news choices, but otherwise stick to your pre-selected and trusted news sources. And just realize it has to be a limited list. You want to unsubscribe from all online newsletters unless it's essential for your work. You can start unsubscribing now, just every chance you get. And you might consider a separate email box for newsletters that are important for your work, say, and then go to that email box that's dedicated to that subject at the time of your choosing, instead of having your day constantly interrupted by these online newsletters and other announcements. So you might also keep a list of organizations that inspire you and that address things you'd like to keep up on, and visit their sites periodically, time permitting. But just don't let it all flood into your email box, and you have to set limits. You can do it. The other thing to know is that there are benefits to handwriting. Studies have shown that both children and adults learn more and remember better when they write by hand. So let's see. Handwriting is better than laptop note-taking for recall, integration, and test scores. And it's important to preserve the benefits to the brain by writing using your hand. Not to say you have to do it all the time, but you want to make sure you get handwriting into your life, and don't ignore it, because it has real benefits, particularly in learning situations. So you want to remove any commercial apps, those that are profiting from your attention. Be really wise about the commercial motivations of all these companies. Plan activities in your life requiring deep engagement and more complex thought. That means read regularly, plan time with people for serious conversations. Both are very good for your brain. Distinguish between activities that are of genuine interest to you, and those that are stimulants and essentially time wasters. So start to discern the difference. Meditate to counter the brain effects of tech and to improve focus, cognitive functioning, and well-being. You've heard from Dr. Luizzo on this. You can develop the muscle for focus and attention. The more you meditate, even if it's just 15 or 30 minutes a day, cumulatively, you're going to start noticing the effects very quickly. And then eventually, you'll get to the point where you're unraveling your brain of the reactivity patterns that you've developed over a lifetime. And that's what real meditation is about. It's beyond relaxation and focus. It's actually getting you down to your true essence, where you understand your true nature and you also understand our interconnectedness.
Can meditation help with addiction in general and, video gaming and so on in particular? meditation is increasingly being found to be a very powerful way to reshape your mind and your brain. It's a way to manually override all the knee-jerk habits that normally drive us, and to learn how to live with our sort of finger on the pulse, or actually with our awareness connected, engaged in the process. So specifically, mindfulness meditation, for example, helps to balance the prefrontal cortex and to disengage it from the amygdala, where we have stress reactivity, to emphasize, to strengthen the left prefrontal cortex that's more optimistic and more confident and proactive and less reactive. So it builds resilience. Other kinds of meditation, like, for example, visualization, might be a very interesting alternative for a kid who's into video games, because it can have the same kind of sort of mental fascination, but because it's a mentally generated practice, it's an organic practice that can strengthen the mind, and you can suggest visualizations that have redeeming content or socially, humanly important messages built in. So, essentially, all these addictions really are, in a way, diseases of distraction. They're all about, I'm not feeling so happy, I'm not feeling so well, I crave something to make me feel better, I want to fix. And mindfulness and other kinds of meditation are the counterbalance to that kind of distraction. They help us learn to be with ourselves and tolerate the distress, face it, so that we eventually can understand it, resolve the causes that are producing that distress, and deal with it in a mature, intelligent way rather than in a reactive way like a cornered animal. Okay? And if you look at the effect on the brain, a lot of the areas that are worn down in gaming addiction, like the orbitofrontal cortex and so on, the insula and so on, are actually built by meditation. So it's clear that, while our attention in gaming or internet is kind of getting spread out, is getting pulled out of our system, out of our control, into this diffuse realm of distraction, mindfulness and other kinds of meditation are disciplines of attention. They're strengthening our capacity to be aware, to be present, and they're building exactly those parts of the brain that are getting worn down by the gaming addictions: the insula, the prefrontal cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex, and so on. So,
getting into the body is another way that you can counter the attention fragmentation. Exercise is an effective means of reducing ADHD and improving concentration, motivation, memory, and mood. It boosts the brain's dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin levels, all of which improve focus and attention. So move your body. It's extremely important. And if you can't, like you're a couch potato and can't get off the couch, and you just really can't get yourself to go out and exercise, then do something very simple. Sit on the floor. Sit on the floor cross-legged and just think about your life and what you want. You want to take these timeouts for yourself, including not just your mind but your body. And something as simple as sitting on the floor, believe it or not, can make an enormous difference in moving you forward. Also, unbundling. Don't be tethered to a narrow focus on one device for so many purposes. On the smartphones, you've got the phone, the email, the camera, the to-do list, the alarm clock, entertainment, your address book, and more. So you want to consider returning to earlier methods of these functions. Use a yellow pad for notes, or a notebook, a hard copy calendar, a separate alarm clock, and a separate camera. View entertainment on a television, not on your little device. Don't agree to be a slave to an electronic device that you need to turn on every morning when you wake up. because so many things are located on this one device, it's got us going beeline right for the device, and that in itself, creates a conditioning, an addiction. So unbundle.
Stanford University.
What we found was that watching significant amounts of television or video and spending significant amounts of time online, large amounts of time online, was negatively associated with a wide range of social and emotional development. These 8 to 12-year-olds who spend a great deal of time online, watching TV, etc., show less social and emotional development, feel less good about themselves, more susceptible to peer pressure, more friends who their parents think are bad influences, etc. The one curative is face-to-face communication. Heavy amounts of face-to-face communication are very strongly positively associated with all these good things. Resistance to peer pressure, feeling better about themselves, etc. And if you have high amounts of face-to-face communication, you can then also have high amounts of these other forms of communication and do just fine. The other result is multitasking. Kids who multitask frequently are also very bad, show negative effects. And we think that has to do with a sort of chronically distracted view of the world, which affects them even in understanding emotions. They're so distracted, even when there aren't technology around, that they don't get the opportunity to learn the critical social and emotional skills which come from looking at other people, thinking hard about their face, their voice, their body posture, their emotions. Because they're distracted, they're missing that stuff. Combine that with the use of these other media so they can't get the stuff, the good stuff, the emotional stuff, and they're essentially have tremendous handicaps. One other thing I'll say is, while not directly from this survey, we have reason to believe that this sort of attention to faces, which comes very early in life, also leads to better practicing attention, which plays out not just face-to-face, but in school. So teachers come to me all the time saying, kids have it very difficult to pay attention. And I think it's because the way, we don't have direct evidence, I want to be clear, this is a theory, not based directly on research. The way you learn to pay attention first when you are young is through other people. That's the practice. It's not from looking at the environment. The environment in 21st century suburbia is not all that interesting or attentive a place. So the real way you learn not just to attend to emotion, but to attend, to pay attention in school, in the workplace, is through all that practice, and all that importance comes from practicing face-to-face emotional things.
In order to improve your attention, you might consider some of these options. You can attend a structured contemplative meditation program, such as the ones offered by the Nalanda Institute in New York City and online. That's Dr. Joe Luizzo's group. You can do neurofeedback training. You can work with an imagery expert trained at, for example, the School of Images or the American Institute for Mental Imagery, both in New York, and both have online programs. You could use the self-paced dynamic neural retraining system started by Annie Hopper to improve limbic system function. She's teaching this approach now at medical conferences, teaching doctors how they can help their patients, and they're really getting great results. Neuroplasticity training through movement with Anat Banyel, another amazing resource. She's got online programs. Gyrotonics and gyrokinesis movement training also helps the brain through movement. And gyrotonics is kind of like Pilates. They use different machines, but the gyrokinesis you can learn, it's just simply floor exercises. You don't need the machines. And you could do these at home. So then you want to use subtle energy approaches that include sound healing, acupuncture, and other approaches that work by releasing blocked energy and stress. And so you're not trying to change anything as much as you are to releasing the tension and the blockages in your system on the subtle energy level. And then finally, and very importantly, you want to eliminate wireless radiation exposure of all kinds, as we've discussed. Next is time management. Here are some tools. So I recommend that you engage in goal setting for every day and make self-organization and planning a priority in your life so you have a structure to work within. And get help if it's not your strength. There are all kinds of people that are out there to help you with your life coaching. You want to set goals for the day, for the week, for the month, and track your progress daily. And this is easy to forget to do, and because you get so busy with all these other things. So I recommend that you make a regular practice of connecting with your deepest intentions that underlie those goals. You really want to stay connected every day to your intentions and why, and in order to really move forward on your goals. Really helps. Do not look at the computer or your phone first thing in the morning. Focus on your intentions and goals and non-computer work that require quiet attention before the day gets going. Just don't start online. Schedule your time online. Choose 2 times, perhaps you might want to consider this, choose 1 or 2 times a day to look at your messages and know more. You want to be brief, find the important emails as if you're on a vacation and you're just looking for anything really important and just ignore the rest. You do this often. People are business travelers. They do this. They don't have time. They get home at hotel at the end of the day and they look through their emails and they do what's important, and they very much limit their time online. Don't linger online. And then email less. Set boundaries and don't feel you have to reply to every email, and don't reply unless they're urgent. And tell people also who send you long emails to stop it. Say that you don't want this kind of very unfulfilling online relationships. We would welcome human contact in person or in the phone. You just got to put a stop to these behaviors that impact your time and productivity. You can also limit social media with time and content blockers, and do this so that you don't fall into the digital drift and time wasting. Track your online time. There are things like, there are all kinds of apps for this, but Toggle Track, Rescue Time, these can help analyze where you're spending your time, whether there's upside potential for greater productivity. They will stop the tendency to drift into the unlimited sea of information by your understanding your present usage. And finally, also perform computer work mostly on a desktop, like at a workstation, not on a mobile device where you're on the go and might have low boundaries. Do your work at a workstation. I want to revisit the chart that I showed you briefly in the beginning. You want to think about the percentage of your year that you spend online. And ask yourself if this is how you really want to allocate so much of your life versus spending time with people, expressing yourself with creativity and contribution, accomplishing goals and dreams. Look at these numbers. If a person spends, let's just take 8 hours online, which is sort of typical. 8 hours, it's 2,920 that's 8 hours a day is 2,920 hours per year, which if you just divide it by 24 hours, you get 121 days online per year. But figuring that we're asleep, several hours a day, and maybe we only have 15 daytime hours, then that number becomes 195 days online per year of waking time. And then that equates to 6.5 months of your life. 6.5 months of your life online. Now, what are you comfortable with? Is it going to be 1 hour a day? Is it going to be 11 hours a day where you're spending almost 9 months of your waking life online? Take a look at these numbers in your own life and do the calculation and see what you're comfortable with. And it may dramatically change your orientation to technology. So we can, it's a good idea to schedule your entertainment, schedule any online entertainment or online education for specific times. Like decide it's only going to be on the weekends, or it's only going to be in the evenings, or decide specific days and times, and make that a structure in your life. And preferably watch it on not on a desktop or connected to a large TV screen, not on a small screen with a narrow focus, which is also not good psychologically. Then never try to watch the summits in real time. Summits are on every topic these days, and we're just inundated with them. And never aspire to really watching them during your day. A lot of people never get to them, myself included, because they're just, how can you schedule yourself for so many different things that are of interest to you? What I do is purchase the videos, the whole set, and then schedule a weekend to immerse in them. Just take one weekend, or let's see, you've got 52 weeks in a year. So, let yourself immerse for however many weekends you want to allocate to really listening carefully to the speakers in a summit on a topic that's of interest to you. But do not allow the many presentations within summits to fragment your days. Bad news. You want to limit all Facebook news feeds by unfollowing people. Doesn't mean you have to unfriend them. You just unfollow them. And then schedule timeouts like with children, for non-tech activities to break up the online and internet compulsion. You want to create space in your life for your intuition to flourish, your instincts to come alive, and to stay connected to that bigger whole. And in today's day and age, we need to schedule it, because otherwise we're pulled in and it often doesn't happen. You might consider 2 planning-only days a week offline, and then 2 doing days where you're actually doing things. You're not planning or strategizing, you're doing. And then take the 5th day of the week, weekdays, and intentionally experience new things in your life. Make a bucket list of offline education, entertainment, or things you want to do. It's the idea is that you're creating that variety that Michael Gilbert spoke of before. You're creating diversity of experiences, and believe it or not, it's going to help you with your planning and with your doing and with your productivity. Really makes a big difference. Then you want to regularly evaluate your efficiency and productivity. How good do you feel about how you're spending your time today? How did you do today? Are you as productive as you once were? And if not, what changes might help? It's really important not just to not just assume that we have to be part of this rapid flow of information, this sea of information, and flow along rapidly with it. We want to really look at our life and our efficiency and productivity, and are we content with what we're doing? Otherwise, reorder things. You want to prioritize excellence in the details of your life. In other words, quality over quantity. And you don't want to be a person who's skimming over information or inhaling it at high speed, not really even reading, but somebody who thinks things through thoroughly, and be known for excellence. Okay, technology management tips. You want to turn off alerts and notifications on your phone, tablets, and computers, meaning disable the sounds and the vibrations. Turn off the phone ringer. Give yourself the peace to not be interrupted when you're working on things. Forward your cell phone to the landline phone, or some phones you can forward to the landline phone or to Ethernet-connected Skype number when you're home. So that you're not exposed to electromagnetic fields. Turn off data on the phone so that only calls and texts are enabled. Keep the phone and the tablet out of sight, and ask your guests to keep the phones off and out of sight also. You want to remove the visual cues and temptation that trigger desire and addiction. I highly recommend you use the Redicare films that can be put onto your screens, whether it's a computer or an iPad or a cell phone, to protect your eyes. I have no connection with this company, but I've read all their research. It's incredibly impressive. And what they're doing is that they're filtering the high energy light that's emitted through digital devices that's impacting your eyes. And digital home and office workers, and also people now in the pandemic using Zoom a lot, are at high risk. And children and teens especially have a higher risk as their eyes have minimal barriers until the age of 25. Focus on that. Minimal barriers till the age of 25. Short-term screen effects include things like eye strain, headaches, dry eyes, blurry vision, depletion of melatonin from LED lights, and sleepless nights. Employer concerns include, from the screen effects, include employee concentration difficulties, errors and mistakes, tired employees, decreased productivity, calling in later sick, irritable employees, potential long-term eye-related healthcare costs, and importantly, in potential irreversible damage to the retina and temporary or permanent blindness. Listen to this. It's really important that we do what we can to shield ourselves from the effects on our eyes from these screens. Let's see, a TV manufactured in 1995 emitted a certain amount of light intensity, and a 2019 smartphone emitted 5.7 times more intensity. Animal studies have shown irreversible cell death in the retina is reduced to approximately 0 when using a Reticare screen filter. So take note. This is not the same as using the controls in your software on your computer for the light. This is totally different. It's far superior. Use both if you want, but this is really what we need to all be using, especially for children. And then also know that monitors vary widely, and that there are certain companies, monitor makers, that are more eye conscious than others. And there are 2 brands that I can recommend: the Asus Eye Care monitors and the BenQ, B-E-N capital Q monitors have for a long time had a focus on supporting your eye health. We can use plant light timers to program routers or TVs or games to be off, or any electronics to be off during the night. And you just get them at the hardware store, typical plant light timer, and attach it to your device. I want to recommend the JRS Eco router from the Netherlands. If you feel you need to have a wireless router, this one is the next best thing to an Ethernet connection, because it's an on-demand only router that, in other words, it's only transmitting and exposing you when you're calling for the internet. So the rest of the time, if you're not, it's not exposing you. And then when it is, like when you're calling for it and it's transmitting, it's also, they've figured out a way to reduce the pulse frequency exposure by about 90%. So it's a fabulous option. I also recommend people explore website and app blockers. There are many on the market today, and there will always be new and improved versions. So keep an eye out on ways that you can limit apps or limit websites. I have a few suggested here to check out: Cold Turkey, Focus, Freedom, and Self-Control. Then you want to explore the minimalist phones. They're sometimes called dumb phones, and they have very limited functionality intentionally. They're designed to limit your interaction online while still providing basic services like this phone and the texting. Some might have a direct connection to a ride hire company like an Uber or a Lyft. So there are many. Some of them are standalone phones, and that's it. And others is like an adjunct to your smartphone, where that you have a duplicate SIM card. And people like these because they are they actually, some of the phones, they don't even let you. One of them, I think, doesn't even let you dial. You can program in 9 speed dial numbers, and that's it. And people like these because if they're out and about and they're jogging, or they're at a restaurant, and they're doing something where they don't want the full computing power or distraction potential of a full smartphone. So really worth exploring these. And then when you're home, use hardwired Ethernet connection, not Wi-Fi, because this radiation contributes to illness and to tech addiction. Now, very few people understand that the electromagnetic fields, the biological effects of the electromagnetic fields, are contributing to the technology addiction. We think it's just the algorithms, but it's not. And so next slide, we're going to hear from Dr. Martin Paul, Professor Emeritus at Washington State University, talking on this subject from a program that he spoke at that we organized in New York a couple years ago.
Dr. Henry Lai and his colleagues at the University of Washington published a series of papers 25 years ago, roughly, that showed, first of all, EMF exposures produce greatly increased release of enkephalins and endorphins. These are the endogenous opioids. So we produce opioids in our brain, and when the brain is exposed to EMFs, these opioids are released in animals. Okay, so you get, and they then act on the opiate receptors in the brain, and they produce the neurological change. Much of the neurological changes in the brain are produced through this mechanism, okay? Because you can block them with naltrexone, which is an opiate receptor antagonist that acts in the brain. Okay, and in addition to that, we know that EMF exposures produce a lot of the physiological changes that occur in addiction, including increased levels of dopaminergic activity, lower levels of cholinergic activity, increased peroxynitrite actually has a role as well, and so there are lots of things that are going on, just like you find with addiction to these drugs. And okay, now. These findings tell us, what do they tell us? That EMF exposures working by VGCC activation activate the opiate receptors in the brain and can generate the whole pattern of activity that's involved in drug addiction. Now, we also have evidence that they can act to exacerbate the actions of various types of addictive drugs. So, so the EMFs can act along with the more conventional opiates, or with cocaine, or with the amphetamines, and with nicotine, to make the whole system much more active, so that's a big issue. Let me say, before I go on the opioid crisis, I want to mention something that's not on my slides. When I was flying out here, and I brought my file, my folder that's got all my addiction stuff in it, and I looked at a review that published by Henry Lai, the same person I mentioned before, that came out about 20 years ago. And what he said in that review just stunned me. So let me tell you what it was. He said that these changes that occur in response to the endogenous opioids following EMF exposures, that they could be learned by classical conditioning. Okay, so what does that mean? You remember the old Pavlov story, thing about, you take a dog and you give him some meat and he salivates, right? If you ring a bell at the same time, the dog associates whatever that means, the meat with the sound of the bell, and you keep doing that, and then you ring the bell and you don't give him any meat and he salivates, right? That's classical conditioning, right? The same thing happens here, according to Henry Lai, with these effects of the endogenous opioids, okay? What does that mean? What that means basically is that the addiction to cell phones, iPads, the internet, whatever, might be caused to a great extent simply by this classical conditioning response to these effects, these physiological effects that are produced by the EMFs in the brain.
So, other tips you can use a flip phone, which also has less functionality than a smartphone, thereby limiting the time you spend on it. Many people I know are moving back to the flip phone. You can, if you're a Google email subscriber, you have the Google Mail's inbox when ready that schedules inbox lockouts and batch processes your emails so that you receive them only at the optimal times for you, reducing time spent on emails. And you can also set a goal for the total time spent on emails that you'd like to spend on emails, that is, and be told how you were doing against your goal. You want to be very careful about understand that there are dissociating effects from texting. Now, texting is an advantage over putting a cell phone against your head from the radiation perspective, for sure. But there are dissociating effects of interacting with people in this way. And you want to, for key people with whom you communicate, and it's important to have a good relationship and develop that connection over time, that trusting, caring connection over time. Unless it's urgent, keep a discussion list of points that you want to discuss with these people, and go over them all at once efficiently on a phone call or in person. The old-fashioned way. Keep a list. What do you need to talk to that person about? And it's far better than not only sending these little pings of text, but also the texts aren't the human being, and it's missing the human being part of it, and it really is important. So 6, you have to decide to slow down, and it's really essential because we're all so sped up today, like you heard Dr. Luizzo say, with the speed meter. It's very, very fast-paced life, stimulated by all these things. So you want to strive to discover your personal rhythms without the that are comfortable for you, without the unnecessary, counterproductive, and constant stimulation. So it means we have to slow down. You want to slow down enough to be able to be fully present to your own experiences. We're not even present to ourselves. And then you can slow down enough to be able to be present for others. And you want to prioritize the evening relaxation time without screens. Screen time at night depletes the melatonin, keeps you awake. You want to engage in calming activities in the evenings and before bed. I recommend prioritizing activities that root you in your community and that are at a human pace. For example, get to know the farmers at the farmers market, the environmental organizations in your area and other nonprofits, people who work at the bookstore. Explore a range of churches and temples. Go outside your comfort zone. Learn what's all around you. Connect with your local community and see how you might engage further. Relationships that are right in your backyard can be very fulfilling and meaningful and sort of have a grounding effect against all of this stimulation from technology. You might also consider handling bills manually and not transacting payments electronically. I believe there's some kind of a benefit that you get from really being connected to know how you're spending your money and to get to know the local vendors and to have relationships around money, not just be transacting online. I know it's more quicker and more efficient, but you may even partially want to consider working with money-related matters manually. Number 7, how do we proactively work with stress? What can we do? So first, I recommend reading The Natural Laws of Self-Healing, How to Harness Your Inner Imaging Power to Restore Health and Reach Spirit, which is by the late Gerald Epstein, Dr. Gerald Epstein. I was a co-producer, and this series of tapes teaches you how to sources of imbalance and also how to resolve them using mental imagery. Very extraordinary education. Then you want to take proactive steps daily to de-stress, and ideally several times a day. Things like breathing exercises, relaxation, stretching, massage, exercise, acupuncture, connecting with friends where you feel loved. And then you might also consider doing a digital detox. You can do a digital detox, say for 30 to 45 days, 100% digital detox, and you'll find amazing benefits. You can try them shorter, you can try a weekend, but when you do it for several weeks at a time, you get incredible results. Children are getting off medication, Dr. Dunkley says. Behaviors greatly improve, and the same thing will happen with us. So this is time that you take away to remind yourself of your personal values and goals, to reset your nervous system, and to discover other fulfilling and meaningful activities. And then add tech back very slowly after such a digital detox fast, and observe the effects carefully, and find out what your limit is before you start being negatively impacted again by the technology. And I suggest that you add back technology, or that you use technology that directly relates to only directly relates to your values and goals. In other words, using the technology on purpose to support you, and not just for the sake of using it. You want to face any uncomfortable feelings that internet time and constant interruptions soothe. We have to look at the truth of what is this doing to us? What purpose is it serving? So, for example, what kind of stresses are you dealing with, and insecurities, loneliness, the need to feel powerful through fantasy and games, any resistance to feeling emotions, etc. Need to really do a deep dive on this one and to see what purpose is it serving you to be constantly distracted online. And you might want to look at very hard at what's missing in your own life, such that you want to go online and see what others are doing as like a stimulant, and getting the negative effects of that as well. You might consider getting a pet to be in the present, not on technology, and they can be very helpful. Drastically reduce exposures to electromagnetic fields. As I've said, it's important to physically remove the sources of exposure. Beware of marketers selling so-called protective products without substantial independent research documenting their effects. There are very few that I found to have that documentation. You always want to get a radio frequency meter to measure the wireless technologies in your environment. You can get one at the EMF safety store. Assess your exposures and recheck them periodically to see if things have changed. If you're informed with these levels, you can then learn how to safely shield when it's necessary. And remediation should never be done without the ability to recheck the effects with the meter to make sure you haven't actually made the situation worse, which can happen. So Section 8, promoting health and wholeness. So I recommend that we focus on the quality of our day more than what we shouldn't be doing, the should nots. We want to do things that make us happy and, nurture ourselves. Focus on quality of life. And then meditate, as we talked before about with Dr. Luizzo. Meditate or create quiet relaxation time, at least 15 minutes, maybe 2 times a day. And you will see over, in just a few days, their cumulative effects, and you will really notice a change in your being, in your center of gravity, in the state of peace. It's wonderful to know that how much power we have through meditation to create the quality of life in our being. Also, recall and pursue low-stim, enjoyable activities. Maybe they're hobbies that you used to do, or time with people, time in nature, gardening. Pursue the low-stim activities. And focus on living your life well, as opposed to documenting your life with many online postings. You might schedule time to be idle and even bored, to allow your imagination to create and open to new possibilities. When you're quiet, when you settle down and are quiet and just idle, you will receive all kinds of ideas and inspirations and guidance from that invisible dimension. You won't get them if you're in a frenetic, busy state. You want to use the senses, play music, paint with colors and textures, go to a museum and appreciate art, travel and learn the histories and cultures and arts of other parts of the world or other towns in your state. Take out books in the library on new subjects of interest. So again, variety is important. Do not mistake friendship for a facsimile of friendship where there is no real connection or relating occurring. You might say, well, I got 1,000 friends on Facebook, but how many of those are really friends? So you want to be able to discern, is there any real connection here with people? And choose to spend time with nourishing friends that you cherish. And again, move the body, seek the integration of mind, body, spirit, and emotions. Be in the body as much as possible and activate it regularly in multiple ways. Eating high-quality living and nutrient-dense foods can make a big difference in the quality of your day and your life and your balance, internal balance, and your ability to avoid distractions. And understand that high nutrition food in small quantities can be way more nourishing than low nutrition food in large quantities. So you want to learn the difference in foods, the difference in soils, the difference in farming methods, and really pay attention to what is supporting you. What is satiating you, what lasts longer, what satisfies you longer. It's quite amazing when you start paying attention. You're going to learn a lot. Sing for health. Sing in church, sing in the shower, in your car, or wherever. Singing is a powerful, integrating, stress-reducing, and healing force. One person I know got a karaoke machine. She hired a man to come and play the music background for her favorite musicals on her piano. She recorded it, and every morning she got up with a karaoke machine and microphone and sang the lyrics to that music. And it was a very short time before her depression lifted. So it's incredible, the power of singing and using that breath in singing. Change routines, be social, collaborate with others, seek out intergenerational activities. Stay focused on what adds value to your life and say no to time-wasting online activity. What's adding value to your life? Where do you really feel the value? Ask yourselves these questions. And stay focused on love. The heart opens in the presence of other people and animals and not machines. Remember that. And live locally, balance in-person local life with a limited amount of virtual life. So it's a good idea to create dedicated non-tech spaces in your home where you can always go for a timeout to pause and rebalance. And, if you don't have a lot of space or you live in an apartment, maybe with a balcony, make it the balcony. Make it a corner. Make it a place sitting on the floor somewhere that is your place to reflect and pause and rebalance. Practice yoga to enhance the connection to that bigger whole. Yoga is much more than exercise. And you could go to power yoga and you get a lot of exercise at the studio, but it's not the same as real yoga, where you can learn this from going to a yoga or meditation retreat and learn what it's really about. It's really more about meditation, actually, about getting to that place where you are connected to the bigger whole and your true essence. So when others are on the phones and not fully present for you, kindly point it out. Express your frustration and how you consider this to be wasting your time. Just say it. People need to hear it. They know it. People do it to them. They know it. Just point it out. Speak up. Then make walks a part of every day. Focus on breathing deeply into the belly when walking. So you can call an old friend, call a new friend, reach out and connect to humans. Write someone a letter expressing gratitude and appreciation. Activate gratitude. Very, very good for us vibrationally, aligning us with the honesty and humility in gratitude can bring a lot of blessings. Do something kind for a neighbor or a stranger. Bake bread, cook a meal, rake leaves, shovel snow. Offer something easy for you that may be more difficult for another. Surprise people with your caring, and it will come back. So take relaxing mineral baths. Clear your energy body. Release stress and blockages in your energy field. You can use Qigong, Tai Chi, deep dive therapeutic writing, which is wonderful, might make you cry, release tension, and other vibrational healing and balancing methods, including stress reducing and coherence supporting mineral drops, which are available. Section 9, tips specific to children and technology. First, I recommend that you read Dr. Nick Kardaras' paper called The Clinical, Neurological, and Behavioral Effects of Screens. It's a summary of a lot of his research that he compiled when he wrote Glow Kids, and it's in the back of Glow Kids' book, and you can also see it on his website. And this covers screens and addiction, screens and psychosis, screens, ADHD, and other clinical disorders, the social media effect, screens and phones in the classroom, and video games and aggression.
I'm deeply concerned about the modern technologies and about the pull of our children away from themselves and their own creative imagination. Children are now looking at their iPhones, at their computers, are constantly playing with technological objects, and so they have very little time to invent themselves. And this is how children have educated themselves for hundreds and thousands of years. They've educated themselves through play. And play means that through the imagination, we find new ways to solve problems. And children have many problems. They have emotional problems. How do they solve them? How do they get to discover that they're frightened and then that they have the imaginal tools to become courageous, for example? So if they are glued to their computers, to their iPads, to their iPhones, to their games, they're not doing that. A video game that might have courageous characters and the play of moving from a frightening situation to a courageous situation is very pleasant, but it is not inventive. And a child needs to be inventive. This is how a child grows. And without that muscle, that inner muscle that he develops or she develops in the play time, it's not going to be the same. It's going to give a good imaginary sense through the movie, through the game, but it is not enough. It is not what will move the inside to learn courage. We have found that a lot of our children today are ADD or on that spectrum of dysfunction, and we nevertheless allow them the technology next to their beds. They receive messages during the night. They constantly respond to this outside stimulation. What we have found, though, is that if you remove the stimulation, these ADD children, for example, will return to normal in a few months' time. I think it is extremely important for parents to understand that quietness and a place of simple play is going to do much more for their children than all these games and technologies. I know that the doctors talk a lot about the stimulation of the thumb and the fingers, and that is somewhat important, but not in any way able to replace the inner stimulation that comes from true play. Apart from that, you have the danger of the technology itself. These vibrations that are constantly on their little bodies or next to their beds or near their ears or in front of their eyes, this is not healthy.
So we want to do everything that we can to protect children from activities that interfere with the development of focus, attention, and concentration ability and creativity. Parents should be very vigilant, especially in the early years, because there are development windows for attention. Very few people know this. People have heard about development windows for language skills, But there is also development windows for attention. And if you don't develop the ability to pay attention, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, later. So especially for young children, you want to limit the exposure to anything that interrupts their attention in the younger years. You want to delay the screen time as long as possible, ideally until age 16 or even longer if you can. You want to minimize their use of social media. It's overstimulating, psychologically harmful. And then in terms of schools, you want to favor low or no tech. You might consider favoring low or no tech schools. Look at the Waldorf and Montessori schools, and also new schools that are emerging that do not use tech in the younger years. The London Acorn School, it's a Steiner school created to educate without technology. The Village Forest School in northern Italy was started last year by a building biologist, Lucy McCulloch. It uses no technology and is also near no cell towers or antennas. Right now it's just started with the younger years. You see the pictures below. They're in yurts that are absolutely beautiful on a hillside with mountains in the background. The classrooms use non-toxic desks, and the lighting is from the top of the yurt, from the sky. And their playground is outside in this beautiful countryside. So this is somebody who saw a problem. She couldn't find a school that she was happy with for her children in Massachusetts, and she and her husband moved to Italy and made this happen. So they're really walking the talk, and I think we all need to start doing that too. Other tips: you want to disallow nannies and caretakers to use of smartphones in the presence of your children. You want to actually put it in the child care contract. You can promote screen time alternative activities like social interaction, art, dance, singing, hiking, outdoor games, indoor board games, puzzles, cards, chess, backgammon, hopscotch, I Spy, etc. And then with children, you want to also foster eye-to-eye contact, particularly so that they can receive feedback from the behavior and expressions of adults. But even just between adults, in order for there to be a meaningful connection, 70% of the time has to be eye-to-eye contact, as you heard Dr. Cardara say. Encourage variety, which tunes the nervous system, which we've heard about from Michael Gilbert. It deconditions the nervous system. Very important. Join parents groups, movements like phone delay, no phone pledge, and wait until 8th. Spend as much time with your child in nature as possible. Help them learn about life from nature, where they are in the living internet, and that is that one big orchestra of communications in the ecosystem and beyond. And it's a good place to ground. You want to hardwire all the technology at home to eliminate electromagnetic field exposures, and also encourage municipally owned fiber optics to the premises in your community. You can follow Campaign for Radiation-Free Schools on Facebook to keep up with the EMF news with regard to children's health, not only related to schools, but to children's health and what's happening around the world. Learn more about the wireless risks to children and how to minimize them at Manhattan Neighbors for Safer Telecommunications. And learn what other countries are doing and be inspired by what other countries are doing to specifically protect children from electromagnetic fields at manhattanneighbors.org. You can see what other countries are doing, things like removing Wi-Fi from the schools, prohibiting cell phones in the classrooms and on breaks, limiting towers near playgrounds, installing on-demand routers, hardwiring classrooms, and actually seriously studying the effects of wireless devices on children compared to controls. So you can do periodic tech detoxes with your children, evenings, weekends, holidays, no tech vacations, camping and wilderness trips, no tech birthday parties, etc. Make it a practice, and then they'll start to really appreciate these times when they see the contrast of how they feel. Focus on no-tech cultural experiences like going to plays, musicals, concerts, museum tours, natural history museums. And get support if you need it from tech management coaches, digital detox programs, spiritual counselors, holistic psychologists. There are not a lot of them, but the field is growing. And you want to make sure in any such person that they also understand the advantages of wired technologies over wireless, as the rest would be very incomplete without this understanding. At Manhattan Neighbors for Safer Telecommunications, that's manhattanneighbors.org, there is a section called Tech Overuse and Addiction, Books and Other Resources. You've got articles, books, digital detox resources, and it's a great place to start, and feel free to send us updates of other things you learn about, because the whole field is really growing. So it's good to recognize the constant distractions from online time is adding to anxiety and a lowered performance, which then adds to further anxiety, and it's a vicious cycle. So if your children have anxiety, really take a hard look at their online time and electromagnetic field exposures. So you want to understand the research showing that multitasking lowers performance and increases errors, though we think we are being more efficient when we're multitasking. We're not. Explain to children the importance of what is being lost to technology. In other words, if you really want to inspire them to change behaviors, you don't want to just tell them to limit things or this is not a good thing. You want to tell them what they're losing so that they understand that maybe they want some of those things, like social experiences, creative expression, nature time, academic performance. All kinds of things are being lost to this wasted time online today. And then you want to teach self-generated mental imagery as an alternative to video games, fantasy, etc., like Dr. Luizzo mentioned. It's working with similarly with images, and but yet they're self-generated. It's truly empowering, and really worth looking into. Parents, you don't want to use tech as a pacifier. You want to help cultivate a child's connection with their inner dimensions and the bigger whole. You want to facilitate the expression of negative emotions. Yes, negative emotions, because online and social media, they're mostly seeing positive emotions. It makes it look like everybody's happy and achieving, and but we need to facilitate and help children express the negative sides also. You can use rituals to add supportive structure and meaning to the day or week or month. You want to measure and track family sedentary time and time online. Remember, in the old days, sometimes some of us would measure our height on the wall with a pencil, and we'd see how we were doing, and every year we'd get better, higher and higher. Well, you could do the same sort of thing, where as a family, you're all measuring your sedentary time and your time online, and seeing how you're doing. When you measure, then that gives you an encouragement if you're making progress, or a red flag if you need more attention there. And then finally, you want to address distracted parent syndrome, because the children are emulating you, and if you have a problem there, you need to get help. We want to realize that as parents, that one of your important roles is to educate your children about the amazing experience that we have being a human being and living on this planet. And the internet is simply no substitute for understanding what the opportunity is that we have in front of us. And through your own sources of activities for your children, supporting their aptitudes and interests and honest communication with them, you can teach children how to discover and open to their own magnificence instead of just putting them on a computer like a pacifier. Your job to do this, and it certainly pays off. Now, if you want to read some research on this, there's an occupational therapist in British Columbia named Chris Rowan. Her company is called Zone In, and they have a series of seminars and programs for teachers, therapists, and parents regarding the damaging effects of technology on childhood development. They provide strategies and techniques, and they work with improving sensory processing, attention, learning, and listening ability. And she's got a tremendous resource on her website that lists all kinds of research studies that have been done in this area that you're going to, I'm sure, find very interesting. So some final thoughts. Society is now beginning to evaluate how technology is impacting the quality of our lives, and the backlash is just beginning. And this program at the Digital Wellness Institute is an example, pulling all these speakers together on the topic. There have been movies, some television coverage. There's the film The Social Dilemma. It's looking a lot at the algorithm effect. So COVID certainly has been increased awareness dramatically about tech risks, which is great because more and more people are on the computer all the time. And we're starting to understand what we're losing with increasing technology. And we're also starting to see more clearly the related data-driven surveillance capitalism, which is also not serving our interests. So on sabotage, understand or recognize that it's self-sabotage to be training our brains out of the ability to focus, period. It is self-sabotage for us to be impairing the ability to relate to others and to lessen our desire to be with others. It is self-sabotage to under-exercise your own minds, outsourcing memory and dumbing ourselves down. It is self-sabotage to be losing human competencies that bring us fulfillment and other cognitive benefits, and to thereby lessen our involvement and potential for deeper levels of caring. It is short-sighted to be developing technologies that replace human work, making us lazy and potentially redundant, without considering the full impact of these technologies and their welcome convenience on our human experience. So, summing it all up, it is truly self-sabotage to impair one's life potential. As author Nicholas Carr suggests we ask, is tech enriching our lives or impoverishing it? He notes that we are putting technology between ourselves and the natural world, cultural world, social world, and physical world. Each of us must counter the constant stream of distraction through powerful choices we need to make for ourselves. Choices to make time for people, nature, music, art, community service, quiet time alone, and for reflection. And to get to know ourselves better so that we can better understand from where fulfillment and meaning arise, and see clearly the many ways that technology is impairing and devaluing the human experience. So the responsibility is ours. And I'm just going to end with the next video is of the International EMF Scientists Appeal to the United Nations with Dr. Martin Blank from Columbia University. It's important to not lose sight of the role of electromagnetic fields in all of the effects of online screen time.
I'm here with disturbing news about our favorite gadgets, cell phones, tablets, Wi-Fi, etc. Putting it bluntly, they are damaging the living cells in our bodies and killing many of us prematurely. I'm Dr. Martin Blank from the Department of Physiology and Cellular Biophysics at Columbia University. It is distressing for me and more than 160 colleagues who today are petitioning the United Nations requesting that they address this problem. We are scientists and engineers, and I am here to tell you we have created something that is harming us, and it is getting out of control. Before Edison's light bulb, there was very little electromagnetic radiation in our environment. The levels today are very many times higher than natural background levels and are growing rapidly because of all the new devices that emit this radiation. An example that a lot of us have in our pockets right now is the cell phone. One study shows that as cell phone usage has spread widely, the incidence of fatal brain cancer in younger people has more than tripled. We are putting cellular antennas on residential buildings and on top of hospitals where people are trying to get well. Wireless utility meters and cell towers are blanketing our neighborhoods with radiation. It's particularly frightening that radiation from our telecommunication and power line technology is damaging the DNA in our cells. It is clear to many biologists that this can account for the rising cancer rates. Future generations, our children, are at risk. These biologists and scientists are not being heard on the committees that set safety standards. The biological facts are being ignored, and as a result, the safety limits are much too high. They are not protective. More protection will probably result from full disclosure of possible conflicts of interest between regulators and industry. Rising exposure to electromagnetic radiation is a global problem. The World Health Organization and international standard-setting bodies are not acting to protect the public's health and well-being. International exposure guidelines for electromagnetic fields must be strengthened to reflect the reality of their impact on our bodies, and in particular, on our DNA. Although we are still in the midst of a great technological transformation, the time to deal with the harmful biological and health effects is long overdue. We are really all part of a large biological experiment without our informed consent. To protect our children, ourselves, and our ecosystem, we must reduce exposure by establishing more protective guidelines. And so today, scientists from around the world are submitting an appeal to the United Nations, its member states, and the World Health Organization to provide leadership in dealing with this emerging public health crisis.
I saw this image on the internet the other day, and I just thought it was really a great symbol. We got a man's head and he's being taken over by his iPhone that has these claws going around his head. And that's really, we are being taken over by technology. We have to acknowledge it, and we are here on this program at Digital Wellness Day. And I want to just point out that in order these technologies also work with antennas, so we need to be looking at the proliferation of both devices and antennas. We have to stop the proliferation of both the devices and the antennas because they rely on each other. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end up with antennas right outside our bedroom windows. And do you want that? Do you want transmitting antennas right outside your bedroom windows? And now is the time to speak up if you care to protect your living environment, because they're starting to put all these small cell antennas on utility poles, lamp posts, street signs in communities. And they're intending to interconnect everything. They interconnect everything through the Internet of Things in your home, through these antennas on the utility poles everywhere, eventually through satellite or wireless technology, and eventually they'll hook us up to all these computers too, like our brains, like Elon Musk is working on it, and others. So we need to understand they're one and the same. We want this technology. We want to use these devices. We're going to have to put up with more and more of these antennas in our neighborhood, and we need to decide what it is we want, whether we're going to ask for hardwired technologies or we're going to allow this to proliferate in the name of, more mobile technology. For those of you wanting to get a handle on what your present exposures are and to monitor it over time, I recommend getting a radio frequency meter. You can get one at the emfsafetystore.com. And for those of you who want more information, you can go to manhattanneighbors.org, Manhattan Neighbors for Safer Telecommunications site, which is chock full of information and great videos that we've produced with top experts, really great resource. Electromagnetic.health.org, mainly focused on the EMF issue. And then there's a campaign for radiation-free schools on Facebook, which is a great site to be able to just keep up regularly with news from around the world in terms of the effects of this radiation on children and what actions are being taken. There's a section I think I mentioned, there's a section on this website where you can learn about all the different ways that countries around the world are starting to protect us, particularly children. So also I do professional and personal consulting, time permitting. We focus on holistic stress management and health optimization, digital wellness and digital detox coaching, minimizing electromagnetic fields and other environmental toxins. And then finally, I do public speaking to businesses, schools, medical conferences, community organizations, foundations, and governments. Be in touch if I can help. My email address is crgr@aol.com, and thank you very much for listening today.